Uganda, Idaho. All right. Keep that up, folks. It's good to see you. Let's go ahead and get started. So welcome, everyone. I want to thank you all so much for joining us. It's really exciting to gather today. We're so glad to have you here for today's hot seat coaching session, Demystifying Grant Strategy and Execution. Grants can be a real game changer for nonprofits, but we know they can also be overwhelming. From misaligned funding and tight deadlines to siloed teams and unclear processes, it's really easy to feel stuck, frustrated, and really downright annoyed sometimes. So today's session is designed to help you break through all of that. My name is Sandra Davis, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm the founder and CEO of Donorly. Donorly works with small and mid-sized nonprofits at moments of growth and change to build their fundraising muscle using donor research, storytelling, and community building. And we really especially love that growth and change moment. I find that the most exciting moment to work with organizations. And I'm really thrilled to draw on the wisdom and knowledge of Jessica Merrell today from 1 Degree Impact. So Jess really thrives at the intersection of philanthropy, business, and purpose. And as such, she wears a few hats. She's the founder and CEO of 1 Degree Impact, where she helps nonprofits build sustainable, trust-based grant strategies. She's also the COO at M7, a consultancy that supports some of the world's most iconic brands through operational and strategic transformation. And as a founding board member of the Merrell Family Foundation, she brings a deeply values-driven approach to philanthropy with a focus on brain health and resilience. At the heart of it all, Jess is passionate about people, purpose, and building teams that actually work. She has a gift for helping others find clarity in the messy middle, and she brings a lot of warmth and thoughtfulness to everything she does. That I can vouch for. Jess, thank you for joining us. Did I miss anything?
No, you got it all. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, great. We're excited to have you here too. So let me do a little housekeeping and we can get started. In today's call, we'll be focusing on grant opportunities for 501c3 US-based foundations. I know there's some international registrants here, so I just wanted to make a note of that. Some of our conversations will no doubt apply to the issues that you're dealing with in any country, but I just wanted to note that we're focusing on the US. As a reminder, this call is being recorded. And if you want to turn on closed captioning, go to Settings, Accessibility, and you can find the closed captions there. We'll be selecting a series of questions from those submitted in advance, and we'll spend up to 10 minutes on each question. So here's how it's going to work. We'll invite you to come off mute if you're here and introduce yourself, your name, your pronouns, your title, and the organization, and then you can state your question. Jess and I might have some clarifying questions for you, and then we'll process the issue with you. If you didn't have time to submit a question in advance, please go ahead and put it in the chat. Our colleague, Weston, give a wave, who's here with us today, will be monitoring the chat, and we'll try to work through as many questions as we can. And please feel free to put some follow-up questions and comments and responses in the chat too. Our goal is to be helpful for all involved, not just those in the hot seat, and we can all learn from each other's experiences. All right, Weston, why don't you get us started?
Thanks, Sandra. All right, let's get started. I'm going to ask a couple of questions before I move to some pre-submitted. And this one, I'm going to focus to Jess, but Sandra, I look forward to your answer as well. You've worked with so many nonprofits on building grant strategies. What's one of the most common misconceptions that organizations have about the grant process?
Great question. There's many, but I am in an effort to stay very focused. Sandra and I are not great. We go off the rails together because we love talking to each other. So in an effort to stay focused, I was thinking about it. And I think the biggest one that gets our clients and kind of just all the nonprofits that I've spoken to over the years in the most trouble is thinking of grants as a quantity game versus a relationship-driven strategy. We talked to so many nonprofits over the years that almost pride themselves, and especially kind of their board really looks for a very high output as the measure of success versus what we look at as what is your return on investment? Like how efficient can you be in securing funds? And so that I think as the core, challenge of viewing it that way gets in the way of the most important piece, which is really thinking of grants as another relationship building activity, and then setting up your processes to function that way.
Yeah, it's all about relationships, no matter what you're doing. So that's really, really good advice. And, I would say also, so important to keep those relationships strong with your current donors, and obviously you need to always be looking for new relationships, but actually your growth may be with the organizations you already have a relationship with. So really keep that in mind as well.
Sorry, I just slacked Weston. I lost sound for a minute, but I got it back. So
Okay.
I missed.
We're good.
So, crisis averted, but I probably missed an amazing nugget of insight that you just gave. So I apologize if I can't piggyback on that.
You have to watch the recording, Jess.
Yeah, I know.
It was all about relationships.
Perfect.
But glad you have sound. With
back.
that, Jess, I've heard you talk about the importance of aligning grant opportunities to your mission.
Mhm.
Can you talk about what that alignment actually looks like in practice, and how can organize evaluate it with confidence?
Yeah, it's a great way to kind of start thinking about things, because we really over the years have kind of changed the way that we work with our clients in kind of direct response to this perspective, which is, everything starts with research, really understanding what the organizations who are most aligned with your mission, and sometimes researching ones that may not on the surface seem like they are, but when you can find those really kind of key insights of areas where, maybe they're talking about their mission broadly, but there's a specific nuance or section within something that they like to fund or that they're passionate about that really aligns with either broadly your mission or something specific kind of underneath your mission. And so that's what we kind of, research first. Then the next one would be what I like to kind of call reframing. So how do you take the way that you can, you and your organization communicate your mission, vision, and values, and make sure that it's reframed in a way that aligns with the way that the funder is communicating their mission, vision, and values. And so in this way, we talk with our clients a lot about where you're putting your foot on the gas and on the brake a little bit. And so it's not just taking your mission exactly as it's communicated in vision and values and just plastering that all over the place to everybody in the exact same way. It's figuring out where that kind of those key touch points align, and then really putting your pedal on the gas of those areas. So if your organization serves everybody, but the funder that you're looking to make a connection with serves a specific proportion of the population, then maybe focus on the narrative and the impact and the data and all the storytelling around that, portion of the population that they serve, and really kind of connecting with them on that, even if that's not 100% of what you do. So I would say those are kind of like the two. And then the last one, and I will say this in ad nauseum, so I apologize in advance, but it is the most important part, is reach out. It's just connect. It's like, how do you find out really if you're the most aligned? The same way you would if you were trying to make a new friend, is like, have a point of connection where you can meet, ideally in person, but in today's world, maybe, it's even better that we can connect virtually, but find a way to connect, ideally where you can see someone's face, whether it's in person or remotely, and just talk to them as a human. And then you get all sorts of extra nuggets, right? Then there's all these other components that either help you identify more about what the funder is looking to fund and kind of what they're passionate about, and also, and maybe sometimes even more important, what the person that's making the decision about the funding, what they care about, what's going to make their life better and easier, and how there might be a problem that they're trying to solve for, that your organization and your ability to connect in partnership, with the grant being a vehicle to request the money, and that's really it. That is where you kind of find these really beautiful moments of opportunity. When you remove the human relationship from grants, I think you just miss out on a ton of value and a ton of efficiency.
So true. So true. What were you saying in our prep meeting the other day? So you were talking to somebody and they said, nobody asked me to go out for coffee. Like, they are human beings too, right? They want human connection. And I think, oftentimes you, as the nonprofit experts, have information that they might need and don't have. Your boots on the ground, and they're kind of removed from that. So when you can provide that information to funders, I think that can be of real value for them. So that's another thing to think about as well.
That's great. It's funny. I was also going to bring up the coffee moment because when you said that to us earlier this week, it like lit me up like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, I spoke. I'll tell it here just because it's relevant.
Yeah,
I will
please do.
clarify. It was with a group of Jewish funders and nonprofits. So everyone don't get excited. Like I have, I was talking to Mackenzie Scott because I'm sure everyone asks her for coffee. But I was on a call. Maybe it was last week at this point, and we were having that conversation. And so it was some funders and some nonprofit leaders, and we were having this discussion. And the funder, she said, "Yeah, no one ever asks me to grab a cup of coffee." And I thought, oh, that's so interesting because I think that what Sandra and Weston and I were speaking about was this idea that our society definitely has like a weird, like icky feeling about money, right? Like talking about money. And I do think in certain areas of life that is right. Like you don't need to go to a dinner party and like ask what money everyone gave that week or what they're investing in.
Right.
But in the world of philanthropy and nonprofits and funders, that is why we all like that is a portion of why we all exist. And so it is, you have to remove that framework of like, don't talk about money because that funder's job is to literally gift out money, grant out money, distribute capital to deliver on what their mission is and the reason they were given the money. And so by not making those connections and asking those questions, you're making their job harder, right? And you hear from funders all the time, we hear like, we don't get access to the full breadth of fund, of nonprofits out there that we know are serving the community because we just can't access them. And I could speak to both sides of the equation, which is, on the one side, maybe make your processes a little bit, maybe, put the guardrails down a little bit and make it a little bit easier to get in touch. But on the other side, I can say, because we've worked at this point with hundreds and hundreds, and I've spoken to tens of thousands of nonprofits over the past decade, that no one's reaching out on that side either. So it's like the kind of the guards are up on both sides. And I think breaking that down. And I feel like, coming out of the past 5 years, I think everyone's yearning for human connection so much that it really is like a very ripe opportunity if you can set your processes and your organization up in a way to operate where relationship comes first.
For sure. Thank you.
You mentioned processes, and that's a great segue into my next question. It's really important to get organized in grant writing. Taking a pause to get organized will allow you to do your best work. How can you recommend getting organized at all levels of this process, whether you're a new organization or have years of experience doing and performing your mission?
Yeah, it's the first step in it. It's like the first step is admitting you have a problem. The first step in it is, and I say this from experience, it's committing to the value of taking a pause. It's like really understanding that sometimes relentless sprinting and grinding and just kind of trying to like, you run a million miles a minute is not productive and it doesn't lead to the results that you want to see. And so number one is like yourself as a leader and then kind of getting your team on board, and whether that's your internal team and your board and just kind of saying this is what we're going to do. But I mean, this is the same conversation that we're having with some of the biggest and most biggest corporations in the world, is at an especially moment now where like technology is just moving so fast and everything's is take a pause. And then we start with audit, is look back at, and I think Weston I think is going to put a link into the chat right now if anybody wants to reference what I'm going to talk about. This will also be sent, I think, in a PDF in the email, the follow-up email. But if you scroll past the kind of overview of what we do as a company to page, like, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5, we put together some of the some of the work that we do with our clients. But there's this checklist that we do when we first start, day one that we start working with clients, which is an extensive checklist of documentation. So it's, collecting all of that and getting that organized. First thing is most of our clients and a lot of organizations don't have all these documents organized in one central place at all. So even just creating like a Google Drive folder and having it all in one place and kind of organized in maybe the buckets that we have it, how we have it structured here. And then it's really sitting down as a team. This I think is a future question. I'm cheating. I'm getting ahead of myself. But this is a great silo breaking exercise as well, because it really would be about like some of these documents have cross organizational function, right? Like this might be reviewing budgets. So that might be development plus finance plus program, all sitting in a room and kind of reviewing these documents. We do this both for internal documentation. Our team also for our clients in the beginning, and then kind of once a year reviews all the external facing stuff, your website, your social media, impact reports, anything that anybody can find publicly, 990s about your organization, and just kind of go through everything with a fine tooth comb to see where there's consistency and inconsistency. Now that might be consistency or inconsistency across the same type of document, right? Every document that you communicate your mission, vision, and values. We have a lot of clients, and this is very common. If we audit our own business, which we try to, practice what we preach, this will happen for us too. This will happen with every organization. The biggest brands in the world this happens with is like, is your brand communicating the same thing consistently across the board so that anytime someone finds it, it says the same thing? That's like one whole audit process. And then do that with budgets and do that with, the way you're talking about your programming. We have a client now that we've been working with for about 7 or 8 years now. They've grown significantly. We started working with them. It was an executive director, some programming people, and us as their outsourced grants team. They're now a multi-million-dollar organization. And I was having my now, twice a year call with the ED. We used to talk, once a week. And she said, I think that we need to go back and just figure out how we just talk about the whole organization collectively 10 years later, because we've grown so much that I don't even think we just are talking in so program specific, because these programs have almost become organizations in and of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really just that kind of audit, assess, and then this is most important, is you cannot boil the ocean. So it's really kind of like deciding as a team where you think is the lowest hanging fruit that will have the greatest gains, right? Like, is the juice worth the squeeze in making some of these improvements? And then also, what are things that can be done now? Like, they're not going to take that long. And then the changing them and updating them is going to make the biggest difference versus things that are going to be huge projects. Like what I tried to do yesterday afternoon, this morning, like revise our website, which was like the biggest, like why I thought that was a good idea. I had no idea. But like those kinds of projects, you'll go in a rabbit hole for 3 days, and you'll come out and nothing will have really been gained. That was like dramatically, versus taking 3 days of like if I would have made 3 days of phone calls, that would have dramatically changed things versus 3 days of like putzing around in Squarespace.
I love how you thought revising your website was like a morning project.
That's what I literally did. I think I was in denial.
That's very funny. I think that this is such good advice. It's just hard advice for people to take, because you feel like you're taking time away from getting stuff done. But I think we all know intuitively that if you organize things and put them in order and make sure you've got all your documents ready to go, that ultimately you're going to save time. You're going to save future self time and future organization time. And when I don't do this, I find myself scrambling for a deadline to find what I know is the most recent version of the text I want. So it's just really, really good practice. And I think organization for grants especially also extends to organizing your calendar and the work you need to do up until a deadline, and making sure you've got all of your reporting deadlines in place, and that you've organized yourself to be done prior, to do all the work prior to that deadline, so you're not scrambling. I've done that too many times in my career, so it's really good to really, really organize all of those pieces.
That's a good point. We have a bunch of clients that kind of throughout, time when we go to review this, or kind of when they're newly starting with us, that like the first, which this seems like, why would you waste your time doing this? Especially like if you bring in someone from the outside to help. It's like, let's look at all the past. What have you been awarded in the past for like many, many years? Let's review that, because often there's just like, when you say like, money hiding under your couch cushion, that kind of is what that is. Like they've already funded you, they know you, they've committed to you. And like, you forgot to go back and ask them again, or you forgot to finish the reporting. So now you can't ask them again. Like those are the places where it's this constant, again, volume point of view. I've got to get more. I've got to get more. And it's like, well, what if we just squeezed more out of what we already got, because we don't have to work so hard for that before, and make sure we like check that box before. So I agree that, I'm glad you touched on that, because, the calendaring of not only deadlines, but when you can reapply to the funder who's already funded you, and what reporting is due, and did you check those boxes? Like that should all be one, kind of viewpoint before you start to worry about new stuff.
Right, exactly.
This is awesome. I want to make sure that we have time to get some questions in from our audience members. So I'm gonna jump a little bit, but as a reminder to everyone, if you have a question for Jess and Sandra, you're welcome to put it in the chat, either about what we're talking about right now. Maybe you're stuck on a proposal and you want to talk about it in real time. We could try to help you out there as well. I'll give you all a few minutes to do that, but in the meantime, I'd like to invite Amy from the International Cryosphere Climate Initiative to come on camera. Oh, you're already on camera. Come off mute. Hi, Amy. Amy submitted a question in advance, which was, it can be a challenge to find the right person at a new granting organization. Jess, Sandra, do you have any tips on successful cold outreach to institutional prospects? And before, I'm sure you have a lot to say, Amy, do you have anything to add, or are you working through a specific example with this?
I don't really have anything specific in mind currently. It's just a kind of a matter of balancing resources where you have limited time. Do you want to prioritize like current funders? And when you do that cold outreach, like how do you know you're talking to the right person? And how do you know if you're spending too much time digging into rabbit holes, or like kind of how would you approach doing cold contacting efficiently?
I'll
Yes.
jump in. We're cheating because Amy's our client. Hi, Amy.
It's not cheating.
In complete transparency, like I'm working with this brand. So I think Sandra's going to have, I'll give like just a little bit insight because this is, I think that Sandra's going to have some incredible points of view here. And then also because Amy can hear more from Sandra because she hears from us. But I think that for us, it's kind of two things. One is we always like to say, look internally first to see what kind of connections you have. There's some wonderful tools. I mean, LinkedIn is probably like the is like the easiest, is kind of figure out like where are your first, second, third connections, and trying to have, I always say like, if I can have one, just any sort of, ideally there's an introduction point, right? Like that someone can make an introduction over an email or a text or a WhatsApp. But even if you can just reference somebody like, hey, I see, Sandra, we're connected mutually through Sandra, like, that kind of just, I think lowers the guard of, someone like welcoming you into a conversation. So I would say that's where we start, is like try to start with some sort of connection point. I think also kind of like I respond to cold emails still, which is, I think some people think is crazy, but like if an email is written well, and actually there was a successful entrepreneur that I follow who's married to Serena Williams. His name's Alexis Ohanian, and he just posted this yesterday. He's much more busy and successful than I am. And he said he responds to cold emails. He said if it's written to the point and it's very clear what the person wants from you. If you don't, and so our team, we have a GPT workspace, and we let GPT help us get to the point of, hey, this is all the stuff we want to say. Here's how we know someone. Here's how we're connected. Here's the thing that we're looking to do. And they say, acting as a outbound sales expert, comma, please help me craft a very to the point, cold outreach email that will increase my likelihood of this person responding. And then you put all the details, right? Like you're not having it write it for you. You're just having them put that expertise in there. And then we take that and we use that as kind of the way, so that we make sure that we're, taking all the expertise we can acquire as it relates to cold outreach. But other than that, I would say, our biggest thing is always just try to find some sort of common, relationship point.
I mean, I respond to cold emails as well. And we use them for business, and we're, getting great responses for that as well. So I agree. And, in a way, Amy, I think this is maybe the only thing, or one of the definite tools that you have to use in order to expand that, group of relationships you have in the foundation space. I would co-sign the idea of using LinkedIn. Use LinkedIn if you can. People who are on it are active. They respond to their DMs. Again, if their DMs don't look like they're sales spam, they have to be really specific and they have to be personal. And I think you can find your way in there, and keep your LinkedIn profile up to date. Share thought leadership, share your expertise. Again, like the foundation program officers, you're on the front lines. You're the experts on the cryosphere. You know the science, and you can teach them something, but you have to be present on LinkedIn. They may be lurking and watching you, but over time, that will make it easier for you to reach out to them. I also would say make a call. You can find the foundation's phone number on the 990 if it's not on their website. And you may get a voicemail or something, but at least you can leave a message. Doesn't hurt to make a phone call. And then for the warm intros, because ultimately you do want a warm introduction to somebody, reach out to your peers, other nonprofits, and see if they'll make those warm intros for you if you know that they're already funded. I would say by and large, people in the nonprofit space are very generous to each other. We are not usually gatekeeping with each other. And I've found over the years that when I've asked for help from my peers at an organization that's already funded by a funder I'm interested in, they're very happy to either make an introduction or give me some advice on how to reach out to that organization. And then just, again, be very clear about what you're reaching out for. You know, don't ask to pick somebody's brain, ask for something really specific or provide something that you think would be helpful for them.
The other thing I was going to say, Amy, because you guys attend so many, you know, kind of industry conferences and you're in such a specific niche and you're such, you know, seen as such experts, is asking people there, does anybody have connections to these organizations, right?
Yeah.
Like we take that research list and, you know, that's been ranked and prioritized and just like walk around with it in your back pocket and kind of like just asking people, hey, have you ever done any work with, or hey, have you ever, you know, really finding ways, because in those environments, that's where you're going to find the person who has that direct connection. And so I think that that creates a great opportunity that not everybody always has the opportunity to tap into.
So hopefully that's helpful, Amy. I think to prioritize, I think those, you know, those warm intros are going to get you the best bang for your buck rather than, you know, calling the main line or sending something to an info at. But it wouldn't hurt to also, you know, carve out a half hour somewhere to do those kind of low potential outreach as well, because you never know. You might find somebody like Jess or me who actually responds to their cold outreach.
Thank you both a lot. That's really helpful.
So thank you, Amy, for that question. And I have a sibling question to this one that was just submitted from Valerie Peacock. Valerie, I welcome you to come off mute if you would like, or on video. But Valerie asked, which I think is very similar to what you just answered, but do you have any additional advice for getting an invitation from a foundation who only gives grants by invitation? I think a lot of those similar relationship pieces, you know, outreach apply, but is there anything else that we can do to start to open up that gate to an invitation?
So that's a great question and an increasingly important one. You know, I would say over the past 10 years of doing this, you know, not in every single vertical within the sector, but in many, whereas maybe 10 years ago, it was like 80% open invitation and 20% gated. It's now the opposite. So we will be, you know, we do research for clients and it comes up where, you know, there might only be a handful that are open invitation and the rest require some sort of existing relationship, which is challenging, right? And I understand to a certain extent why that's happening, right? Like they only have so much capacity as well. I think the same response kind of goes, right? Like you have to find an in to create a connection point with that funder and your organization. And so if there's a way to, you know, identify people within your organization or, you know, kind of ancillary spaces, if you're going to, you know, different conferences or attending virtual, you know, different virtual opportunities, I think it's really about same thing, like, you know, using LinkedIn as a tool. It's why relationships are just going to continue to become more important. And I would say also, you know, trying to, again, figure out how making sure that all of those invite only opportunities are the best use of your time. And so, you know, what we say is we go back and say, just make sure we're revisiting all the opportunities that have funded us in the past and kind of build from the middle out instead of, and so there is room for, right? Like in ICCI's case, there is room for a cold outreach situation, or it is worth doing the discovery to see if we can create a path to getting an introduction to a funder who's invitation only. But you'll want to make sure that's only taking up a certain amount of time, because there are funders who have more open invitation. There are relationships to be made where you might be invited to you know, submit a proposal if you invest the time up front on the relationship instead of chasing opportunities that are more closed that you don't have a connection to already. And usually like the relationship begets another relationship, right? Like these funders are all connected at the kind of, you know, cause level. And so when they're connecting with each other, and there may even be opportunities, the stronger relationship you make with someone, think about it as a friendship. The longer you've been friends with somebody, the more willing and able somebody would be to make an introduction to you. You're not going to go to somebody who you've known for 6 months who just did a favor for you and ask for another favor. But if you've been working with a funder for 3 years and you know that they might have some connection to another funder in the space, then they could potentially be an introduction for you.
I was just thinking about that too. There's an organization I am on the advisory board of, and they're trying to build out their donor base from scratch. It's going to be a lot of grantors and some individuals. So what they've done, what we're in the middle of doing right now, is partnering with some lead donors, grant makers in the space that there were relationships with, having them co-host a roundtable that we are then going to invite other funders to, have those funders help us invite, but also just use those big name, very familiar foundation names on the invitation for social proof. So people will be more likely to come to the roundtable. Before we do the roundtable, though, we're going to send out a survey and ask what people would most like to learn and talk about, and if they'd be willing to come to an event. So you can use those relationships that you have with your current funders as a way to, leverage those to, build out your other relationships. Something I've done over the years to, some not great success, but I think it's a good kind of basic practice, is to take into your board meetings every time a list of trustees from a few foundations you'd really like to be in touch with, to see if any of your trustees know any of the trustees of those foundations and would be willing to make a connection, invite them to an event, make a phone call on the organization's behalf, anything to, improve that or start that dialogue.
Thank you. That's very helpful. We're also building everything from the ground up. So it's been a little bit of a struggle, and we're in quite a rural area as well. So not many people know where Donaldsonville is. So we're really having to push ourselves out there.
Yeah, it's
Thank you. That's
challenging.
very helpful.
Keep going, Valerie.
Thank you. That was great. I'm glad. Thank you, Valerie, for that question, and Amy as well. I think they paired well together. I'm going to take us in a little bit of a different direction, and I'm going to invite Kathleen Hines to come off mute for a question pertaining to smaller organizations. She asked, how can smaller nonprofits who are looking to diversify their grant programs compete with bigger nonprofits? What do you recommend for smaller nonprofits to set themselves apart?
Hi, Kathleen. Thank you for bringing this question. Good to see you. Is the question on behalf of clients or?
Yes, it's on behalf of clients. Yes. Yeah.
It's just an ongoing concern. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you
I have
think,
a
Jess?
clarifying question. When we say smaller, can you just kind of give some context to smaller versus larger?
Sure. I would say in this case, smaller would be an annual budget of 2 million or less.
Okay, great. Just making sure it wasn't like 250, because then I would have a different point of view. We get that a lot. Great. These are all such great questions. So I think for the thing that's been coming up for us a lot, we do a lot of work in analyzing the funding landscape for our clients. So we do, we kind of get them organized, we do the research, and then we give a kind of 1 to 3 year view on where we think the funding landscape's going. And one of the things that we're finding, which is not going to be surprising, is data. And it doesn't have to be like fancy data that you're like spending all this money on a survey or anything like that. But there are a lot of funders who are starting to refine the way that they're asking questions because they want really specific numbers. And we're finding that a lot of organizations are giving kind of fluff language around certain things. And so it's like adding some clarity and sense of urgency to the problem and what that funding will do to help to alleviate that problem. And so sometimes it's just, and again, a lot of this comes in this kind of like audit and assess process, is like, where do you have data now, impact data that kind of shows the outcomes and kind of the impact of the work that you're doing. And then, in the work that we do with research is we're identifying places where the data that our clients have check the box, and then a bunch of gaps, a bunch of areas that like, if they had this data, they would be able to go after it. And so I think that it kind of postures a smaller organization as a larger organization, because I think that there are certain things you can do to be organized about the way that you present and respond to a proposal that kind of removes that perception of, right? Like we have clients that are large that when they first come to us, they kind of, they're information is they almost are showing up like a smaller organization from an organizational standpoint. And so I think it's really just kind of how can you posture and really be clear about the impact that you're having and how the investment is going to, substantially increase the ability to, so it's to say, if we're here now because of this, and this is the urgency of where we need to go, here's what this investment will do. And just kind of creating that clarity, I think, it gives the funders the ability to kind of look at it as an apples to apples versus really being like, okay, this set of organizations is larger and more sophisticated and can show us, right? Just the same way as if you're making an investment, like they can prove what the ROI on our gift to them would be versus smaller organizations who sometimes can't.
Thank you, very helpful.
Do you feel just like there is an automatic bias towards just a large expense budget? Or do you feel like, organizations, the funders will take the time to kind of really dig in and on the impact?
I mean, we don't really see it in that way because we're so refined about the opportunities that we discuss and go after with our clients, right? Like that's all about the strategy is we're not going to have our clients go after opportunities they're punching way out of their weight class. Like we're going to incrementally get them up to these places. And so we spend so much time, like I can't reiterate enough, like it's our entire focus now is on research. We spend so much time figuring out and analyzing who that funder has funded in the past and what are the average award sizes they've given and what has that money been used for to make sure that we're not asking for something that's like completely. So by the time our clients are, we're submitting these grants on behalf, with our clients, we already kind of know that we're not making this big leap, and sometimes we're asked to consider to include in the calendar and kind of in the process something that's much larger, and we really will push to say, if this funder is not funding any organizations in your general size, if you don't have a relationship, this is like it might be throwing money away. There's not, it doesn't always make sense. And so I think that it's hard for me to answer that because we're just not in a position where we're having our clients like we're not just like submitting everything to everyone. So for us, it's really just based on, we're trying to get as close to, and then when we're hitting these, which I learned this from you, that kind of key inflection points of growth, right? Is we're just trying to get right up to that incremental so that we're trying to find these overlaps of like the funder that funds that space right between where we were and where we're trying to go. So we can kind of use that as like a leap, like a leap pad, lily pad, versus trying to make these giant, maybe more unrealistic moves.
Yeah, that's good. Good stretch.
Yeah, thank you. I surprise another sibling question that I just think is fitting for this paired with Kathleen's question from Patrice, who asked, thinking about those smaller orgs, do you have any advice about institutions with small staff and trying to work on these grants, maybe like 1 or 2 staff members, which I'm sure we've all experienced those small organizations. Jess, what would you prioritize doing when staff time is limited?
This is going to probably be a very counterintuitive response, but I would say focus on major gifts. Don't focus on grants.
It's okay. 100%.
It's just like when you have, I'm laughing too because now I see Doronda's on here too. This is like our tribe of people who like are in this grant space. We always say that we kind of joke about that, but especially because Doronda, her main thing is government grants, and we're always like, and we have small organizations who come to us and say like, what about government grants? And we refer out to Doronda, and Doronda says, don't even send them to me. We say, don't do government grants if you're too small, if you're only 2 people. But I think that the idea there is like, there will be nothing lost from building the muscles and the discipline and the habits around major, right? It's moves management, it's cultivation, it's whatever you want to call it, whatever term you want to use. If you can get your relationship building, asking, because you're going to need the same general documentation, right? Like you're going to need to know how to communicate. You're going to need to know. And so when you get into, we were talking about this, I think we were talking about this last week or earlier this week, that like the grants is kind of like a bank loan. And so it's really like, in the beginning, if you don't have any if you can't pull all that documentation together, which is such a pain, and you can't keep it organized and you don't have a reason to be using it a lot, it might be better to just go to like your friends and family and say, can I borrow some money? So it's better to kind of like create that core circle of people who know you and trust you, because you may not have the the rigor, just the ability to put the rigor behind what it takes to have all that documentation and keep it updated and keep it organized. But if you start, I would think about it again, don't drop the relationship piece and think about it as a tool. So try to start with relationships and kind of go after opportunities that maybe like are really more about kind of getting your feet wet and starting to build out that library or portfolio of documents you're going to need, how to really, start to kind of, figure out how you need to be positioning your budget. So they're just going to ask for grant funders are going to ask for a lot more than a major gifts than a donor might or likely will. So that would be my advice, is wait until, and also, major gifts, like donors, they don't usually put a lot of restrictions behind their money, whereas grants is very restricted. And so if you can use the unrestricted funds to kind of help build some of your capacity before you go to try to get funding that's most likely going to be very restricted, it just is usually a better use of resources.
It's a good starting point, and it can be quicker. It can be slower too, but it can be quicker if you've already have the relationship to secure a major gift or an individual gift. And I was talking to another grants consultant the other day. We were talking about this idea of federal grants for small organizations. And I asked her like what her advice is usually when people ask about those things. And she said, start local, start with your city or your county, and then you can build out from there over time. But don't go immediately to a federal grant. I would say don't go immediately to the Gates Foundation or to the Ford Foundation either. Start with a local foundation. Maybe it's a family foundation, which can act like major gifts sometimes. And then in terms of thinking about staff time too, getting back to that, because small staff, small teams, it's always a struggle how you're spending your time. And if you're not really disciplined about that, you may spend a day doing all kinds of random things which are not going to move your ball forward, right? So be very disciplined about how what the trade-off on your use of time is. And now I think I'm going to sound like a broken record, but coming back to like those relationships you already have, look at those relationships and say to yourself, is there any opportunity for this $10,000 grant to turn into a $15,000 or $20,000 grant if we talk about X or Y, or if we show growth, or if we, prove our impact and talk about where we want to go with this program? Because if you can turn a $10,000 grant into a $20,000 grant without having to even build a new relationship, that is a lot easier than finding that next new funder. So that'll save you some time.
Thank you.
I was going to say, one of the big themes I've just realized in general are like, and as a business owner, this comes up in my entrepreneurial communities on a daily basis too, with companies all over the world of small and large scale, is there is no silver bullet to any of this.
Yeah.
And grants are definitely not
Sadly.
going to be it. Like, there's definitely not going to be grants. So if like kind of erasing that mindset out of, that there's going to be some like fast way to figure this all out. We had so many clients, 2 years ago who, after the first round of Mackenzie Scott, once it became yield giving and it was more of like a process, almost all of our clients were like, can we go through that process? And, we swapped out that month and we said, let's go through it. Let's see. Like, we really, from year one, it kind of seemed like maybe you could have, who knew, who could have a shot? And, it ended up being by year two, pretty much a regular grants process. If anything, even more involvement from the nonprofits had to judge each other's proposals. And so, and that was kind of, I think that shifting of just not looking for something that's going to be fast and just really building that discipline around these core activities, relationship building, staying organized, tracking your time, and making sure that you're putting your time into things, and making sure that, especially with a small team, that like you really are putting your time into those like high value, high outcomes activities.
And I will say, from the outside looking in, if it looks like it's fast, like if you looked at those Mackenzie Scott grantors in the first year and you thought, wow, how lucky they were, that's amazing. These are organizations that already proved that they could take advantage of that funding and make use of it. So even though they didn't have direct relationships or communication with Mackenzie Scott, they were doing the work of building their program, building their success so that they, made it to the shortlist.
I was going to stop you halfway through, but I think that this is really valuable, so I appreciate you continuing. We are almost out of time, but I'm feeling inspired to ask, and this one should be quick. What are some practical ways that you can recommend creating a more proactive and sustainable grant calendar?
Great question. Let's see. So I would say, so we kind of do it in two ways. One is so there's kind of two components to this. There's existing opportunities, right? Like what does your existing opportunity in calendar look like? Do you have one? So starting point would be make one. It doesn't have to be fancy. You know, there's all these tools and things, whatever. Get an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet, like just have something somewhere, but really making sure that you're documenting some key components of, you know, there's key dates that the funder's going to ask for, making sure that you're building in some other key touch points, right? Like you don't want to just be reaching out once a year when the proposals due. So kind of taking some of maybe what would be your, again, major donor, you know, your major gifts, relationship building pieces, and kind of building out a checklist and then putting that into your calendar and like kind of creating some sort of process using the tools that your team already uses. Like don't try to introduce all these new tools and CRMs and things. Like they can be great over time, but like, especially if you're under-resourced or you're kind of trying to just is like start small and prove out something that works, and then you can add to it. And so start super simple. It's making sure that you have your existing portfolio under control, that you're clear on, you know, deadlines. When are you able to resubmit? To Sandra's point, how can you turn 10 into 20, 20 into 40? Making sure that you understand where the reporting requirements are and that you're up to date on all the reporting requirements. There's nothing worse than being able to resubmit only to find that you hadn't completed the reporting requirements and now you can't resubmit. So that would be first, is like start with what you already have and just make sure that that's shored up. There's always opportunity found in existing, what you've been funded for in the past, to either increase those asks or just to go after them again when you forgot that you didn't. And then if you're identifying new opportunities, we have a kind of a ranking system that we look at. So we come up with a way to kind of identify what's like perfect fit, you know, good fit, mild, you know, kind of okay fit, not fit, and like not qualified at all. So we have our own ways to analyze that. And then we layer that on top of obviously deadlines. So some are rolling deadlines, some have hard deadlines. Is it open invitation or not? And so we kind of create the calendar for, especially for new, based on what is going to be the easiest thing. If you have a relationship, it's open invitation and it's a rolling deadline, you know, it's a set deadline and the deadline's coming up soon. You kind of rank those in a way that makes sense. And so again, that requires a pause. You have to be able to we try to advise clients to not be like a hunt and peck mentality of like every time someone slides an opportunity across your desk, because the amount of time it takes just to analyze the eligibility and the criteria for a grant would maybe mean you miss out on just going through your old list or kind of taking. So if you're going to commit to research, really make sure you have a dedicated person who's very detail oriented, who loves that kind of work, that's going to sit and take a dedicated amount of time to identify enough opportunities that actually sets up a calendar. You should have at least 3 to 6 months worth of opportunities all reviewed in one place before you kind of calendarize it. Otherwise, if you're doing that, you're going to suck up so much time just like constantly looking at opportunities and then only to find out on the last page of the, you know, criteria that you're not the right fit. So it's making sure that you're setting aside time to make dedicated efforts to identify new opportunities, and then you're building on a calendar. You're not like starting from scratch every time. So if you know that you have 3 months left of opportunities and you're trying to get out of 1 or 2 or 3 a month, then making sure that 3 months in advance, you're doing another round of research to be able to kind of fill in that. So it's a pipeline. You just have to always make sure that it's full, because nothing's worse than you kind of submit your last open invitation with no deadline to find out that everything that's left in your pipeline is closed and or the deadline already passed. So it's just kind of like being sensible about the way that you structure everything.
That's so good. I would say about the research, you reminded me that when I sat in the grant writer seat years ago, when I started doing research, and when those things slid over my desk and I really needed to respond to my boss or leadership, what I would do first is try to find a reason why we didn't fit. We were outside the budget level. Our program focus didn't match. So I try to do that first, because you can sometimes do that pretty quickly and then, you know, kind of check it off and move to the next thing. The other thing I wanted to touch on, you mentioned, we talked about reporting requirements a bit here. And there are times if you miss your deadline for reporting, just reach out to the funder and, you know, make it good. Don't say, okay, well, this is lost, or, you know, I screwed up and I'm never gonna repair this. Just go ahead and reach out. They're very understanding, and, you know, get your report straight, and then you can move on to the next level. And then, other thing I want to say is about CRMs. I haven't found anyway, a CRM that is good for individual giving and grants. They kind of don't match very well. So in the end, I think the best way, unless you have a really, really robust grants calendar, is just to manage it in a spreadsheet, in Airtable, in Excel, whatever. I think that's, in my, you know, experience, that's been the easiest way to manage that, rather than to try to kind of find a way in your CRM that's designed for individual giving to manage your grants. I've tried it.
Agree. And
That
I would
was
add on the reporting side, sorry, Weston, one more thing.
No, go for it.
On the reporting side, the other thing that just popped in my head, I thought this is where you were going to go with it, was check out the reporting requirements before you submit.
Oh, that's a good one too.
Because oftentimes it's not worth it when you look at what they're going to require you to do. And ironically, sometimes the smaller opportunities have the more stringent reporting requirements. So we have the client I referenced earlier, who like we've been working with for forever, and they are a large scale organization at this point. And they said they had a grantor wanted to give $2,500 grant and do a site visit. And they were like, a site visit for $2,500? That's going to cost us more to do the site visit than the $2,500. So just kind of keeping an eye on what the reporting requirements are, and just like, does your team have the capacity? Is that the best use of your time? Because there are funders now more and more that are like loosening those, right, in this kind of trust-based, you know, big bets philanthropy, whatever we want to be calling it, that are not putting as much reporting requirements, and those would be great to go after.
Yeah. Annie in the chat says, if you aren't going to make a deadline, try to reach out ahead of that deadline rather than after. Great advice, Annie. So let's see, we've got 5 minutes left. Weston, I think I'm going to wrap us up.
I was going to
here.
pass it to you, but I think
Okay.
you've both given a lot of practical advice and things that we can all sign off and go work on later today, or start the week fresh with a new grant calendar.
That it is Friday, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to share all of our contact details in the chat, and we will also share it in an email shortly after the call ends. So next week, we'll be sending out a recording of the call, some key takeaways and details on our May hot seat coaching session. So in May, I'm glad to be joined by Mitch Stein, who is head of strategy at Chariot, which is a payments company for donor advised funds, or DAFs. And he has a lot of good insights on the mysteries of DAFs. And if you followed that at all, you know this is a growing area of philanthropy, and really important to, you know, kind of be up on all of the details there. So I hope you'll join us. It's scheduled for Friday, May 30th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And we hope to see you there. Jess, this was such fun. Thank you. I knew it would be. But I really appreciate all your wisdom and insight and your kind of strategic brain on all of this, which is really, really needed. So thank you so much for being part of this.
Yeah, thank you. And I just am so grateful for the community that you've created within, you know, our industry. It's just brought not only so much insight, but just so much joy and like amazing connections. So I'm really grateful for the effort that you put into just driving so much value within the industry and for
I
our
love
friendship.
it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so on that, let's make sure to keep in touch. So you can find me at donorly.com. Donorly socials are @_donorly. Everywhere, that's where you can find us. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well. I'm trying to be more active there. I think, Jessica, you're trying to be a little more active there as well. So, you know, find us there. We will answer your DMs. We will respond if you post something in response to our posts. And Jess, you can be found at onedegreeimpact.com. And on LinkedIn, we're going to share your email, and we're going to share an appointment link for you as well. So if anybody wants to have a one-on-one with Jess, click on that, and then you can go forth. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Love doing this. Take care. We'll see you
Have a great
next time.
weekend.